All right, folks, Thursday, the 24th of July, and we've got plenty to talk about today. Celtic have landed in Italy for the Como Cup, and they'll be facing Ajax later tonight. But before we even get close to talking about the match, there's a mountain of things happening around the club right now. So strap and grab a brew and let's get stuck into it. First things first, let's talk training. The lads were out at Lennoxtown yesterday for their final session before flying out to Italy. And the club, as usual, dropped their behind-the-scenes footage. These clips are always a great way to gauge who's in and who's missing. And this one didn't disappoint. The big headline, Alistair Johnston, is finally back in full training. That's brilliant news considering how long he's been out, and it couldn't come at a better time, with competitive fixtures just around the corner. Alongside him, we saw Sean Yamada getting stuck in as well, another face the fans are curious about after his recent arrival. Now a few interesting names popped up that got fans talking. Cameron Carter-Vickers, yes, he was there and looked sharp. Hopefully we'll see him get some minutes in Italy. Marco Tilio trained to, despite the increasing rumors linking him to Rapid Vienna. It's still a bit of a mystery whether he's actually traveled with the squad, but just the fact that he's taking part in sessions suggests he's still very much on the radar for now. Then there's Yang, the same Yang who was snapped in a Norwich shirt just the other night, also training with the team. The whole situation's a bit odd, and it does raise a few eyebrows about where his future lies. Stephen Welch being back in full training was another surprise, especially considering how devastated he looked when he went down with a shoulder issue a couple weeks back in Cork. There was a lot of noise about him potentially returning to Belgium, but this throws a bit of doubt over that. If he's fit again, maybe he sticks around, or maybe the injury scared off potential suitors, and he'll now need to prove his worth again before any deal can happen. Now look, apart from a couple of absentees, specifically Hyo-Kyu Kwan and Hyo-Kyu Kwan, the whole first-team squad was involved in training. And let's be honest, no one's really expecting Kwan to be involved anymore. In fact, Brendan Rodgers himself confirmed that Kwan is on his way out. A French outlet reported yesterday that he's set to sign for Nantes in League One in a permanent deal with a 3-year contract. Apparently the medical has already happened or is about to, so that's him off then. Now here's the mad part. Kwan signed for Celtic 2 years ago and never played a single competitive minute. Not one. It wasn't like he was brought in for the B team either. He had the full scarf above a head, signing photos, the press conference, the works. And yet he leaves the club without having contributed a single minute on the pitch. It's wild when you think about it. And I know I've got too much time on my hands, but I ended up going down a rabbit hole, looking back over the past couple of decades to see how many Celtic signings have suffered the same fate, brought in as first-team players but never making an appearance. You'd be surprised. It's actually more common than you'd expect. Players like Marco Tilio have at least made a couple of appearances, both off the bench, so they don't count here. Liam Shaw and Osazier Hoide got some minutes in that Real Betis game under Ainge, so they're technically not in this category either. But there's a handful that fit the bill. In that same summer a few years ago, we had Luke O'Connell, Jonathan Afolabi, and Leo Connor. None of them ever played a competitive match for Celtic. Now you could argue they were more like project signings for the future, but that's a similar case to Kwan, is it not? And here's a bit of trivia. Who was the fourth player that summer? Jeremy Frimpong. So it wasn't a total disaster, was it? Frimpong came in with zero expectations and ended up being a top talent and a huge profit for the club. That's the model we'd like to see work. There were a couple of others too. Remember the American duo Andrew Gutman and Manny Perez, both were signed, neither ever kicked a ball for the club. Weird ones those. Kunde Benyu did play a few matches, not many, and he was in that same batch of speculative signings. Marian Shv is another one that comes to mind. We all remember Brendan Rodgers' famous quote about having 1 million wingers already. Shv made 3 appearances, so he technically doesn't make the list, but again, that whole saga was just odd. Going a bit further back, Jeremy Aliadier on loan from Arsenal made to sub-appearances. And then there's Douay, who famously had that horror show against Clyde, subbed off at halftime and never seen again. And we can't forget Raphael Scheidt. Cost £5 million in 1999, made 1 start and has gone down as one of the worst signings in the club's history. So no, Kwan doesn't top that list, but in terms of recent Celtic signings, it's disappointing. There wasn't a massive fanfare. No one was getting his name printed on the back of shirts or anything, but there was a bit of buzz. Some folks were even comparing him to Busquets when he came in, believe it or not. 2 years later, not a single minute played. It's just one of those odd Celtic stories that make you shake your head. Shifting back to more current matters, there was an update on Lennon Miller last night. Reports suggest he's increasingly likely to make a move abroad rather than stay in Scotland. Celtic have long admired him, but the feeling is that he's got his eyes set on a foreign move. That's been a quiet storyline this summer, surprisingly so. You'd have expected a proper transfer saga around him, the top young talent in Scotland, linked with Celtic, but now it looks like the door's closing on that one. And to be fair, it might just be that there's no space in the current midfield. We're already well stocked in that area, and maybe it's just not the right time. Now over in Italy, Brendan Rodgers and Callum McGregor faced the media last night. They did their broadcast round together, and truth be told, not much was said that we haven't heard before. A few platitudes about Italian football, the atmosphere, Scottish players abroad, that sort of thing. The first 10 minutes were fairly forgettable, and I say that as someone who actually watched the whole press conference, but near the end, there was a little bit more meat on the bone when Rodgers was asked about transfers. He was honest about the fact that Celtic still have work to do in the market. He mentioned again the glaring gaps in the front line. If Marco Tilio leaves, we're down to 3 wingers, Dazen Maeda, James Forrest, and Hyunjin Yang. And even Yang might be on his way out given all the talk. So we're threadbare in that area, and Rodgers knows it. He also mentioned the need for another striker. It's not breaking news. We've all seen the holes in the squad, but at least he's being upfront about it. He said he's confident the club will address those areas before the window shuts. We've heard that line before, haven't we? Not to be overly negative, but that will get it done by the end of the window line is dangerously close to becoming the modern version of we tried, but the right players weren't available. What was interesting, though, was Rodgers' chat with the written media, where he was more direct. He talked about the club's 2-track transfer strategy. You've got the first-team ready players like Kieran Tierney and Benjamin Negrin, and then you've got the long-term projects like Callum Osman-Hayato and Amura and Shun Yamada. It seems Yamada's being viewed more like a developmental player than an immediate contributor, which might surprise some fans who thought he'd be ready to make an impact now. Rodgers was also very clear in saying that even with these types of signings, he still has the final say. He evaluates every player before they're brought in, even the ones meant for the future. He said, "There will be players within our recruitment team that are not just for now but for the future. I'll look at them, assess, and decide if they can come in and play." That's good to hear. No one wants a manager saddled with players he didn't ask for. He pointed out how Inamura, for instance, was expected to need a loan, but has surprised everyone. With how well he's done, Osman might still go out temporarily. And Yamada, although Ra has traits they really like, but Rodgers also repeated that more quality is needed now. And this is where fans get a bit anxious, because we've got 10 days until the Champions League qualifier and we're still light in key positions. The club can't treat the transfer deadline as the actual deadline. We need players in. And OW not in September. That qualifier is crucial not just for the prestige, but for the cash. Celtic made over £37 million from UEFA last season. And when you compare that to what Rangers made for reaching the Europa League quarter-finals, which was less than $13 million, you see the gap. Champions League football is transformational. And if we go into that qualifier with obvious weaknesses, then we're asking for trouble. Rodgers seems calm. He says the work's going on behind the scenes. But calm doesn't win games. Urgency does, and right now we need urgency from Celtic. Rodgers might be projecting calm and composure, and sure, it's great to have a manager who doesn't panic in public, but the fans are restless, and for good reason. There's nothing wrong with signing 2 or 3 players for the future each summer. That's sensible business. But when the squad has glaring holes in it, real gaps where starters should be, that needs addressing before you go gambling on potential. Developmental signings are fine, but they can't come at the expense of the here and now. That's the balance Celtic have to get right, and right now it feels like the weight is tilted too far towards the long term. Rodgers even acknowledged the concerns in his own way. He said, "I've always developed players in my career, so I respect that side of it. But also the need for the present." That's as blunt as he's going to put it. He's not throwing anyone under the bus, but he's making it crystal clear we need first-team quality. And we need it fast. He added that while he loved players and now he understands the market, and if it takes until the end of the window, so be it. But for most fans, myself included, that just doesn't sit right. Because let's be honest here, the end of the transfer window isn't the real deadline. The real deadline is the Champions League qualifier. That's the line in the sand. Get the players in and get them bedded in before that game. Because if we go into that tie with a thin squad missing, key options, and with players unfamiliar with their roles, we're setting ourselves up for a fall. And that fall is a costly one. Miss out on the Champions League and you're talking about tens of millions lost. Not just money, but momentum, relevance, European nights under the lights. All gone in one slip-up, and here's the kicker. We've got enough time, just about 10 days. That's enough to get one or to keep players in and start to integrate them. But we can't be dithering, penny pinching, or trying to pull off last-minute bargains. That approach rarely works, and when it does, it's luck more than planning. The time to act is now. Rodgers knows it, the players know it, and every single fan can see it clear as day. Speaking of players, Rodgers also spoke about the lads we signed last season. Guys like Gustav Lagerbielke, Make Nawrocki, and Odin Diogo home. He made a point of defending them, saying they brought pace and power and contributed positively. And he's right in some ways. None of them were disasters. But none of them really hit the ground running either. What we need this season is for them to step up, show growth, and become real assets. Because if they stay at last season's level, we're not progressing. We're treading water. There's still hope for them, of course. Lagerbielke had flashes where you could see a solid center half in there. Nawrocki, when fit, looked composed. Home, you could see he's got a football brain, just maybe lacked confidence. But this season can't be about maybes and what-ifs. It needs to be about performances. They've had their betting in, period. Now they need to deliver. Elsewhere, Callum McGregor's been speaking as well. He talked about the tears he shed after the Aberdeen defeat in the Cup final. And for anyone who ever doubted how much Celtic means to him, that moment should have ended the debate. He said he feels a personal responsibility for the club's success. And it shows. You can tell he carries the weight of the badge every time he steps on the pitch. He's not just captain by name, he leads by example through thick and thin. And now finally, let's talk about the match tonight. Celtic versus Ajax in the picturesque backdrop of the Stadio Giuseppe Sinigaglia in Como. The Como Cup kicked off last night with the hosts coming from behind to beat a Littlehead 3-on. Former Celt Mikey Johnston played and Alexandro Bernabei started too, though Bernabei's blonde hair caught more attention than his performance, to be honest, so Como are into Sunday's final. A Littlehead will play in the third-place match on Saturday. That means depending on tonight's results, Celtic will either play in the final against Como on Sunday or in the third-place match against the Littlehead on Saturday, so it's more than just a friendly. It's a good chance for Rodgers to get another look at his team under competitive pressure, against top opposition and with a little structure around the format. Ajax come into this one unbeaten in preseason so far. They've played 4 matches, including a 6-3 win over Hibs that honestly sounds more like a score line from a video game than real life. They've also beaten PAOK and Midtjylland and are clearly building some early momentum. Their league season kicks off shortly after ours, so they're at a similar stage of preparation, which should make for a pretty balanced encounter. The Dutch media have been talking up the game, and manager Johnny Heitinga, newly appointed this summer, confirmed that a couple of their under-21 stars, Jorel Haddo and Kenneth Taylor, won't feature tonight. That'll be a bit of a relief as both are highly rated. Still, Ajax's squad is brimming with youth. Not many familiar names to the casual fan these days, but they do have a few recognizable faces. Wout Weghorst is probably the standout. The big striker who was at Man United recently, Davy Klaassen, is another. And they've got Roque Mesa on the wing, someone Celtic were actually linked with last summer before he made the move to Ajax. Heitinga is a bit of a wild card himself. He was Arne Slot's assistant at Liverpool before stepping into full-time management this year. And he's walking into a job with massive expectations. Ajax finished second behind PSV last season, but the gap in quality was clear. And even finishing second in the Eredivisie gets you straight into the Champions League while we're slogging through qualifiers. Don't get me started on that. It's a whole different rant for another day. So how will Celtic line up tonight? Hard to say. Rodgers might go full strength for 70 minutes give or take and then rotate. Or he might mix things up right from the start and split the minutes more evenly across both games this week. It's a tough balance. You want players to get minutes, but you also don't want to overload anyone this close to the start of the season. Reports in Scotland last night hinted that Shun Yamada might not feature tonight, though it's unclear if that came from Rodgers himself or just media speculation. On the flip side, Carter Vickers and Johnston are both expected to feature, which if true is a bit surprising given their recent fitness issues. But it might be a sign that Rodgers wants them sharp for the Champions League qualifier, and this is the only real chance to get them match action beforehand. The setting for tonight's match is stunning, by the way. The stadium might not be the most modern, but the view of Lake Como and the surrounding hills more than makes up for it. It might feel a bit like a closed-door match though. The crowd wasn't exactly buzzing during the Como vs. Al-Ittihad game, so don't expect a raucous atmosphere, but hopefully enough locals show up to give the players a bit of energy to feed off. Kickoff is at 7:30 Celtic Park time and the game's being shown live on Celtic TV. So if you're looking to watch, that's your best bet. Regardless of the result, what we really want to see tonight is progress, players getting sharper, partnerships forming, and Rodgers getting closer to identifying his starting 11. Because the real business is just around the corner. This is the final stretch of preparation. The talking's almost over. Now it's about putting it all together on the pitch. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. There's a right stir brewing in the East End o' Glasgow, as whispers grow louder that Romanian striker MUNTEANU could be on the verge of a record-breaking move to Celtic. No official word by the club just yet, but sources close the deal suggest the young hitman's signature may already be inked, with figures floating about that'd make it one of the most expensive signings in hoops history. The 21-year-old, who's been macking waves wi Fiorentina and more recently at Ferro Constanța, is said to have caught the eye of the Parkhead scouting team after a storming season in the Romanian top flight. Word is, his movement, composure in front of goal, and sheer work rate ticked all the boxes for Brendan Rodgers, who's been keen to bolster his attacking options ahead of a pivotal season, both domestically and in Europe. Speculations rife that the deal could exceed previous fee records set by the club, hinting at a clear statement intent by the Celtic board. There's talk of a fee nudging past the £10 million mark, a sum rarely seen in Scottish football, which has naturally got tongues wagging across the terraces and online forums alike. While neither Celtic nor MUNTEANU's current representatives have gone on the record, the player's recent social media activity, including a few cryptic emojis and a sudden unfollowing spree, has only added fuel to the fire. And if recent sightings at Glasgow Airport are anything to go by, the Romanian might already be in town. Of course, deals of this magnitude don't always come with guarantees. Some fans remember well the cautionary tales of big money rivals who struggled to settle in the Scottish game, but others are already dreaming of MUNTEANU leading the line under the lights at Paradise, bringing that clinical edge to a squad brimming wi creativity, but at times missing that ruthless finisher. Whether it's just chatter or the real deal, one thing's for sure, there's a buzz back in the East End, and MUNTEANU's name is at the heart of it. Watch this space. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.